Today, we are talking about phase, where it can happen on your pedal board, what to do about it, and how to use it to your advantage. Today is all about phase. It can be very useful, like the out of phase position on your Fender Strat, or it can be extremely frustrating, like when 2 amps are out of phase and canceling out frequencies. It's something you need to be able to recognize and know how to deal with. Just a couple of caveats at the top of this video. There are multiple waveforms that your guitar might produce depending on the pedals you're using. For simplicity's sake though, today we are just going to talk about sine waves. There also is a difference between a phase shift and polarity, which a viewer pointed out not long ago. Thank you. Today we are only going to use the term phase as it is the industry standard, even though it is incorrect in certain uses. So today we're just going to say phase and sine waves. There are multiple points on your pedal board where phase might be inverted. Most of the time you don't even realize it's happening and it's totally fine. However, phase inversion can become a problem when you don't mean for it to happen and it is competing with another signal. Let's do a couple of examples to make this a little bit more clear. Let's say you have a guitar plugged into a ZVEX Super Hard-On, an overdrive pedal that inverts your phase. From that overdrive, you then go out to your amp. You are not going to realize that that overdrive is inverting your phase because it's not being listened to in comparison with another signal. If you take that ZVEX Super Hard-On and run it in parallel with another pedal, another overdrive, that does not invert your phase, now these two signals are going to be competing with each other and canceling frequencies out. You'll mainly hear this in the bottom end. Another spot that you might run into phase issues is between multiple amplifiers. Certain amp manufacturers and certain designs will invert the phase of the signal coming into its input. If another amp being used at the same time does not invert the phase, you are going to run into phase issues or cancellation. These amps are going to sound like they don't have much bottom end and they're going to be competing with each other. You need a way to correct phase in both of these scenarios. Before we get on to the fix, let's show you some out of phase examples just so you can hear what I'm talking about. As you can hear, they're a little bit honky. They have the bottom end shelved out, and unless you're doing this on purpose, it doesn't sound all that great. Again, you can be out of phase between parallel lines on your pedal board. If you're running a series pedal board, don't worry about it. You can also be out of phase between multiple amplifiers or outputs. There are a couple of ways to invert your signal. If you're doing this between parallel lines on your pedal board, you will most likely want to do this with an op amp. Some pedals will have an optional phase inverted output or switch on them, and you can use that. You can also just get a phase inverting junction box and it will invert your signal for you. If you're running multiple parallel lines, this is the most cost-effective way to do it. If you can't find what you need, get in touch with us and we'll build you one. If you want to invert phase for an amplifier, you can do this with that same phase inverting circuit, or you might want to use an audio transformer as it will also come with ground lift. A handy feature, check out last week's video. An audio transformer will work in a similar way by pushing a button to invert the phase. This will instantly bring back those canceled out frequencies and you'll know that you're having that issue. A way to test that two signals are out of phase if you don't have the equipment to do it, which I assume most of you will not, is to do it by ear. If it's between 2 amps that you suspect are out of phase, unplug one of those amps and just run signal to one. If you get all that bottom end and the honk disappears, chances are you were out of phase. If it's between multiple lines on your pedal board, turn off all but one of those pedals or one of those lines. And again, if you get that bottom end back and that honk goes away, chances are those lines were also out of phase and you need to correct that. Let's go back and forth between 2 lines that are in and out of phase in this next audio clip, and you'll see exactly what I mean. As you can hear there was a bunch of bottom end that came back in when we put those lines back in phase. In the same way, it was shelved out when we were out of phase. You can have in or out of phase issues between any number of lines. If you're running 4 parallel lines, for example, 3 out of those 4 might be out of phase and you need to correct that 4th line. It can be a tricky thing to deal with, but just take it one line or output at a time and you'll be able to correct the phase issues that you might be encountering. When dealing with amps, just to highlight this if it wasn't clear, it is amp dependent. So you might be in phase with 2 Vox AC30s, you might be out of phase with a Vox AC30 and a Fender. So you want to be able to easily go back and forth between inverting and not inverting your outputs. I hope this video has been helpful. I know those audio examples really demonstrate what out of phase signals sound like, so feel free to use them as a reference. Put any comments and questions below and I will get back to you quickly. We'll see you next week for another video.